right. We've just got the nod of affection here from our producer-engineer, Mr. Ash, and the program is Viewpoint. The co-hostess to my right is Judith K. Busby, who is also our neighbor and a dear friend of my family's and her kids, too. Well, dear friend of her kids, dear friend of my kids, whatever the situation is.
And on.
Well, right. Politicians are with us today, but only by definition. Not the guest today doesn't act like the usual politician.
Good grief. You don't remind me at all of the mayor of Toronto.
Only visually.
That's good.
Only visually. Anyway.
It's size,
Oh,
maybe.
he's a big bone boy. Yes,
well,
he is.
Kudos. The young folks at the St. John's Church have for several years now put on this thing at the Legion currently, was out west of town at another venue for some years. But those, and this, as I understand it, a youngster in the church several years ago, I think 11 now, came up with this idea of honoring veterans. And so the church youth get together, aided and abetted by some very nice adults. It was a nice affair. Mm-hmm. It was really a very, very nice affair out there the other day. And I just want to tip my sombrero to those youngsters in the St. John's United Church of Christ. Wonderful job. We really appreciate it, all of us. There were some old gaffers even got up there and danced.
Well, I'm sure you and your bride danced.
I said old gaffers. I wasn't, so I myself. Yeah.
No.
Some of the younger gaffers tried that too. But seriously, nice affair. So we really appreciate that. Judith K. And Your Honor, and Mr. Ash, and folks out there, all of the 2 or 3 of you out there listening this morning.
Both ones.
The both of yous. Somebody like to read books, and I bring this up because it's in conjunction with the subject of veterans. There are 2 books that I have read recently. One is an amazing story, and I think I've alluded to this before on Viewpoint, about this German fighter pilot in World War II who flew upon this, found this B-17 bomber straggler way miles behind the rest of them, but the pilot obviously was going to force on and see if he couldn't drop his bombs and complete his mission. And quickly the German fighter pilot was surprised that he didn't receive fire from this bomber, and he got closer and closer, and he saw the tail gunner all slumped over, and he knew he was done for. And the suicide waste guns were hanging without being used. And he finally flew up close enough, and he got up, and you could see our pilot. He was struggling to keep this doggone plane aloft and on. And here he is, a sitting duck, and he could have shot him down or nothing. And he opted to escort them to the English Channel and saluted them and flew back into Germany. Now, in and of itself, that has got to be one of the great stories to come out of World War II. But there's a sequel to that story. The 2 pilots met some 40 years later. And the author researched this story for over 8 years, making many trips to Europe and back and forth. And, it's a gripping book. And I have seen the pictures on the internet of the 2 pilots and their meeting afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it's just really, really a gripping story. And so, for some fast reading, I recommend A Higher Call is the name of that. And now there's another one called Lone Survivor, more modern war, the Afghanistan mess. And SEALs. And this is written by a SEAL who was a lone survivor. They were sent out to do this mission in the mountains of Afghanistan. And they were discovered, and they were grossly outnumbered. Anyway, it's a gripping book, and it's called Lone Survivor. And they're going to have made a movie out of it, and it's going to be, I think, released in December. So that's something I would commend for some reading. If you want to lose some sleep, I usually stay. Once I start in the book, I usually stay with it. Sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, Judith K., I've expounded enough now.
If I were up till 3, I'd be reading through my eyelids, I'm afraid. We have a fine guest today. Mayor Keith Snyder, Your Honor, thank you very much for coming to be with us. You've got lots of things going on around this town, haven't you?
Well, there's some things going on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you come. How's it going?
How's by you?
How's by you? Yeah.
Well, I think things are going well. We've got, as you said, we've got lots on our lots on our plate.
You get all choked up when he gets around.
That's right. We are, in fact, just a recent council meeting. We had a presentation from our auditor, and they told us, things are looking well there. We have some nice balances, which are the result, I think, of watching, what we've been spending. So,
man, you don't mind if I recommend you to the state and the federal governments, do you?
No kidding.
Well, it's we're kind of at the tail end. I don't know if we're the tail that wags the dog, but I mean at the higher levels they can spend money that they don't have,
and they do.
And they do. But we're required to have a balanced budget
by law.
By law, yeah. And so we have to mind the pennies pretty carefully, and we've had good relationships with the unions. We're in the middle of some long-term contracts with the employee unions, and our department heads have been very good about watching what they spend. So we've been fortunate that way. So I think things are going okay. We've got some projects going on. We've got the street project there by IGA that's really quite involved.
How's that coming along, Keith?
Well,
on a serious note, that's been a tough thing for Charlie and Bill there on that corner.
Yeah.
And I felt pretty badly about but the end result's going to be quite decent. I mean, that street really, really needed some help.
Right. And that block, you couldn't really see underneath the blacktop as well as you can a little further out Pulaski, where the bricks, the underlayment of the bricks have failed, and you ride a pretty good washboard going out Pulaski Street to Ladue. But that involved taking out the street, taking out the bricks underneath, actually going all the way down to even put in new sewer lines.
Yeah.
So separating the sewer lines so that the sanitary sewer is separate from the storm sewer. So that work has all been done, and they're pouring the concrete now to get that lane in front of IGA done. They'll make a call on whether the weather until winter actually arrives. We've had some days when it's felt like winter.
Yeah.
But when winter actually arrives, they'll make a call as to whether they're going to do the other side of the street or if they're going to save that for spring. And then definitely in the spring, they'll go from that block that they've done on Pulaski, they'll go all the way out to Ladue Street. So Pulaski will be concrete.
And do the street to the same degree that they've done in front, go clear down and so forth?
They'll take everything out. They'll take the curbs out, the bricks, the concrete base underneath there, take that all out. Replace the sewer lines, and then go back in with a concrete street with the brick curbs and new sidewalks.
There was a time when the only one who knew where the sewer lines were was Dobby Shea.
That's right. He still may be the only one that knows where they all are. But
yeah, isn't that the berries that happened? Now, I saw something about a little piece of ground that had been dedicated, named after, and wasn't it
parking lot?
Dobby?
Yeah, Shea parking lot behind Gazzardo's.
Well, I hope there's good sewer under that plot.
I'm sure there is.
Well, he knew them all, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
he was unique.
Yeah, that's right. We found one interesting thing we found at that intersection of Pulaski and Sherman, down at the end of that block, that IJ block.
Yeah.
They were replacing the manhole underneath there, and the contractor got down there and found at the bottom, apparently when they were putting in the manhole, they used bricks. So that was all done with brick years ago.
Sure.
And apparently at some point, a brick or two failed. So the cure was to put some concrete in there.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't dig down to see how much had washed out behind the brick. So they just kept putting concrete in there. You know how sometimes at home you shoot caulk in until it squeezes out? That's what they did with the concrete. And they ended up putting so much concrete down there that the contractor had to go in with a jackhammer to jackhammer it out to get pieces big enough for the backhoe to even pick up. They had almost like a dump truck load full of concrete that went through those little holes that the bricks caused. And it was all around the manhole down in the ground.
Talk about pounding sand in a rat hole, huh?
They stopped the leak. So
well,
648-5510. Some of the mayor's constituents might have a question. Mind you now, this is a public radio station. So be nice when you call in. But seriously, somebody might have a question,
Sure.
Keith, and I know you'd be happy to field their questions to the extent that you can. Some things can't be talked about too much because they're in a state of limbo, or they're in process, and can't really take too much talk about until it gets to that point.
Sure.
What is the, I want to comment and commend your sewer system folks in the office there. This is the reason we have a little surplus on some of the funds. Mrs. Gossett was $1 short when she wrote the check, and so we got the bill for the interest for 10 cents. So,
Oh, my. Heck, that's more than you get at the bank.
so we owed, it's not owed now, but we owed $1.10, $1 short and 10 cents.
So there.
So that's why we're in such good shape, Keith.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to get into a subject I don't want to get into, if you can follow that.
Sure.
Fall is...
I have a lot of those, by the way.
Right. Daily.
Fall is definitely here, and I noticed that when I came out the door to come here this morning. All the leaves off my tree are in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time to start picking the dudes up and doing something about them. Where we live, I think maybe where you live too, Jim, we have brick streets.
Mm-hmm.
Would you please just elucidate for a moment here on what the rules and regulations are for taking care of all the leaves that you're going to be coming up
I.e. burning,
against?
which is not allowed, I don't think.
Well, I'm not sure.
There are some strict regulations around burning, and you really have to be careful. There are certain hours, I believe it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, is where it's allowed. You can do it on a brick street. You cannot do it on an asphalt street, anything
At all.
blacktopped, because
No.
the heat could
Correct.
damage the pavement. Now, you have to be, I believe it's 50 feet away from a structure.
You have to have
I
a
thought it
hose.
was 30.
You have to also have a water source there. You have to watch it the whole time. You want it to be dry. You want it to be very dry because you don't want to be creating a lot of smoke for your neighbors.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think most people have kind of
Done away
come
with
to the
that.
conclusion that it's easier either to mulch them up, to bag them up. The city landfill does take leaves. So if people would like to get them bagged up, they can take them out there. And the landfill now is open every day except Sunday. So folks can go out there and take their leaves out there and dump them out there. There also will be some pickup days, and I don't know the dates of those, but the street department typically in the fall sets some dates where people can bag their leaves into paper bags.
Yes.
And those are the only types of bags that they'll take. But if they bag them into paper bags and leave them out at the curb, the street department will come by and pick those up.
Well, usually don't you put in the paper that we'll be in this neighborhood on
Yes.
this date and that neighborhood on that date?
Yep, they usually try to pick a few days and do it by ward. So there's each fourth of the city basically is, well, look at here.
Yeah.
I didn't know it, but now Jim has it.
Yeah, okay, we got. Well,
What-
that's why he is so important to this station.
Go
He
to
does-
the news
He does more than
source.
just vacuum the floors.
The news leader, WLCN. Okay, well, I've just been informed.
There we go.
Here we go. Ward 1, there are still 2 remaining dates, which is Thursday, November 7th and Wednesday, November 20th. In Ward 2, it's Tuesday, November 12th and Friday, November 22nd. In Ward 3, it's Thursday, November 14th and Monday, November 25th. And in Ward 4, it's Monday, November 18th and Monday, December 12th. And they need to be in biodegradable bags, those paper
Sure.
bags that you can get at Ace Hardware, other places. They need to be out by 7 a.m. on the pickup day to make sure that they get them. That's when they start work those days. So there's a couple of days now for each ward, and if anybody has any questions, they can call the street department, and that number 732-4655.
Okay.
Well, there you got the whole thing.
There we go.
That's because his station is so doggone efficient. He's got that right at his fingertips there.
That's right.
Because Jim saved the day.
Landfill, Mr. Mayor, is the landfill under new ownership or management? I was told that the city doesn't operate that anymore. Is that correct?
No, we still do.
You
We
do?
still do.
Well, I
Yeah,
was
it's under the
not told.
auspices. We have a permit from the EPA,
I
actually,
see.
to operate
I was
that.
told wrong.
And we do have we're in the process, we have a contract with a company that is slowly grinding up some of the branches and all. And what it is, it's a company that takes that mulch and then they dye it and then they sell it.
Sure.
So we've worked out a deal with them where they will grind up what we have out there, and basically they do that for free for us in exchange for them getting the material then that they can use in their products.
Well, you're glad to give them this stuff to get it out of there,
Sure,
aren't you?
sure. Now, they're there sometimes. There have been some issues with them maybe keeping up with the pile, but that we do have that arrangement. No, the city still runs the landfill there, and it accepts branches, any type of yard waste, branches that might fall off a tree or things like that.
Yeah.
So they'll take all that.
And they're open from what to what now on every day but Sunday?
It's 8 until 3:50, I believe. 8 in the
Okay.
morning until 3:50.
Mr. Mayor, this is a blindside question, and I almost need to apologize in advance because it's such a broad question, really. Of all the problems we have in the city administration, and every city has problems, of course, is there one glaring thing that bothers you more than anything else, Mr. Mayor, as far as the things that need to get done that's kind of frustrating that you can't get them done because of finances and so forth?
Yeah, well, I think it's infrastructure, and in that,
We really have a big infrastructure problem.
Yeah, I would lump into that streets and sewers. We do have some.
Where's Dobby when you need him?
Yeah.
We do have. We've done some work and done some planning with regard to the streets. We have a 5-year capital improvements plan, where the city engineer last year went across every street in town and basically assessed them on a scale, and we have now a 5-year plan for how we can address those things, trying to get at some of the worst ones first. But there is only limited funds to do that. And the worst street for everybody is the street in front of their
That
house.
they live in.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
but people have been very good and understanding about we need to tackle some of the worst situations first, and we're trying some different things to try to make the money stretch as well. There's a process on streets where it's called heat scarification, and I don't know a lot about the engineering side of it,
Yeah.
but basically what they do is they heat up the top of the road so that it melts a little bit, then they peel off a surface, kind of mix it up, if you will, and lay it back down to smooth out the street. So it kind of uses some of the materials there instead of just laying more material on top of
building
each
it
other.
on
Yeah,
top,
building
yeah.
it up. So that process is going to play out either, yet this year if the weather allows, or certainly in the spring. So we're trying some different things, but there are only limited funds, and there are lots of streets that need attention. We know that.
Yeah.
The other side of it is the sewer issue, and we're going to have some real challenges with that. We have about 33 miles of sewer that are combined sewers, which means that when you brush your teeth in the morning, that stuff that goes down the drain goes out and mixes with the stuff that runs off the street and then runs into the sewer. That then runs out to the sewer treatment plant.
Yeah.
And if there's enough stuff that's going down through the system, some of it diverts into a stream and actually bypasses the plant if it's more than it's capable of holding. So what happens then is that the EPA gets concerned because we have these events.
Yeah.
So they're going to be coming in at some point and telling us that we need to separate these sewers. And that's going to be a big price tag. If you think of a sewer line running basically from Lincoln to the state capitol, we're going to have to dig that up and take this
gosh.
combined sewer and separate
Them to
Yeah.
sanitary and
and storm.
sewage.
That
Right.
can't even be done by our local streets and alley and sewers departments, can it?
No, we'd have to have other
Engineering,
contractors
the
come
whole
in to
nine
do
yards. It's a
that.
big
Yeah,
deal.
it'd be very expensive, very expensive. Quincy and Keokuk, Iowa, two cities on each side of the river from each other, recently have gone through this with the EPA, and I think the Keokuk, what they agreed to with the solution in Keokuk was about a $70 million cost, and Quincy's I think was $41 million.
Oh my.
So they're very expensive. So we're in the process now of engaging a consultant to do what's called a long-term control plan to actually assess what we may need to do. So it's going to be expensive. And again, it gets back to just having limited resources. So
Yeah, well, where in the world are you going to come up with that kind of money?
yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we can. there's different things you can do. You can increase the capacity of the plant, but that's very expensive, and then you're only doing it to deal with maybe 1 or 2 incidents
That's
a year.
stopgap,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, well, and you're spending a lot of money to have a supersized plant that you might not need during the typical course
Well,
of the year.
either way, you're spending a heck of a lot of money to deal with something that isn't an everyday occurrence.
Right, exactly. So we know that's on the horizon, so that's going to be a challenge for us to deal with.
And there's no hope, I'm sure, of getting any grants or aid from the state of Illinois. They don't have any money.
Very little.
Yeah,
Very
they've got
little.
so many
Yeah.
problems. Speaking of problems, we're going to have a deep problem, serious problem with our sponsors if we don't take a little commercial break at this point in time. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash. And we're right back live in the studio here high on the hill on County Road 2250, Lazy Road. Our guest this morning is the Honorable Mayor Keith Snyder, a young gentleman whom I've known since he was in swaddling clothes, by the way. Keith, I wanted to ask you the question, a city administrator, how is that working out, and what duties has she been able to take off of your shoulders and the city employees' shoulders?
Sure. I think it's been working great. Sue McLaughlin, the city engaged through a contract with actually a temp agency. It's called GovTemp USA, and they're a firm that specializes in placing individuals into positions for municipalities. And we had contact. Actually, it's kind of funny. I had a year ago this time, I had moderated a session up at the Municipal League Conference in Chicago, and one of the speakers was actually the CEO of this company. And I had told her at the time, I said, we're in the process of trying to find our first city administrator, and I kind of walked her through what we'd done, and she said, had you ever thought about possibly engaging somebody on a temporary basis to see how the whole process might work? And I said, honestly, I hadn't. So we talked further, and one thing led to another, and we ended up engaging Sue McLaughlin, who came from Mattoon, to be our first city administrator. And she works on a temporary basis. I mean, she's a temporary placement for us.
Yeah.
She works about 4 days a week, and she's really, has taken a lot off the mayor's plate. As I told everybody that we interviewed for the city administrator position, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah, right.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah. A lot of people, now, for example, Buzz was on the council forever and knew a lot about city goings-on. I would have, I've just been a mayor 4 years. We have some newer council members, and things like municipal finance and understanding grants and all of the intricacies of municipal operations, I wouldn't say that we had a good handle on. We plodded along, and each department head was kind of responsible for their own area. But we didn't have anybody over the top. The mayor in Lincoln is a part-time position.
Yeah.
It pays.
So is the legislature supposed to be.
That's
I just
right.
had to throw
That's
that
right.
in.
That's right. As is radio host, I think. But
Yeah, well, that'd be true.
Well, then that to be said. Yeah. Temporarily, at least.
yeah. But part of the mayor's job is obviously to oversee the city departments. And so I would meet monthly with the department heads, but now that we have the city administrator on board, she meets with them weekly. And she has basically taken over the operations portion of city government. So the department heads now report to her. She can deal with them on individual needs that they may have. She has expertise in things, like personnel matters or finance and things like that I certainly didn't bring to the table. Not the depth of experience that she has in municipal matters. So I think it's been a very good move for the city. She can concentrate on kind of the day-to-day operations. The council then can kind of pull itself out of some of those day-to-day operations and do more of a kind of a vision casting, looking forward, providing the policy direction for the city, and then it's her job to implement the policy decisions that are made.
Yeah.
Buzz had wanted that for eons. He'd be so happy.
Yeah.
And on balance, I think it's safe to say, Mr. Mayor, that no council person up there had the depth of knowledge as to the financial workings of the city as Orville V. Buzz Busby. I've personally seen him sitting there at his kitchen table laboring over that many
Sure.
hour.
Sure.
So
Well,
he had that, but not everybody has that expertise or the desire to get that involved.
Absolutely. It's a tedious task. I mean, it's a $13 million organization, the city is. That's about
business.
that's about what we spend on an annual basis. And to know where all those dollars go and how they're allocated. So you have the spending on one side, so you have to know all that, but then you also have the revenue on the other side, and the two have to balance out for us, unlike some of the other layers of government.
Yeah.
But they have to balance out. And Buzz was just phenomenal at that. I know Alderman Mel Anderson, who's now our finance
Yeah.
chair, just relied on Buzz all the time. And I think all of us up there still have in our drawers red pens that Buzz brought into a meeting
Oh, is that
a
right?
couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He bought enough red pens for the mayor, all the council members, and all department heads. And he said, you guys start cutting your budget or we're going to see nothing but this, and holding up the red ink. So that was our reminder that we need to cut things to get the budget back into balance.
One of the less enjoyable things that you have to face must be this business of taking on the raising of properties that need to be raised, because we're all in this city of Lincoln or the city of Atlanta or any place else together. And if I let my property go to pot in a handbasket, that affects Bill greatly.
Sure.
So you have to think of other people. You have to take care of your property, and sometimes it just gets out of hand for people.
Well, we have absentee landlords, or so-called, quote, slum landlords. And to be honest, that's a fair expression to use in some cases.
Right. And foreclosures, that's been a huge deal.
And
That makes for a
That's very
mess.
complex, too, isn't it?
It
And
is.
it's expensive.
It is, because you're dealing, mortgages get sold on the secondary market, and
Right.
you're not dealing with necessarily State Bank of Lincoln or SEFCU. You're dealing with some mortgage company in New York City
Yeah.
that doesn't give a rip about what's going on in Lincoln, Illinois. And so it's very complicated in trying to find the owners of some of those properties. I heard recently that Illinois' foreclosure rate is twice the national rate. So the
Why?
foreclosed and abandoned houses, I don't quite know why, but we're higher than the national rate. And so all communities have had to deal with that. And it is very difficult. I don't think, before I became mayor, I don't know that there were a lot of houses that were torn down, but we've torn down several of those. And we have some processes that we can follow through. The city doesn't actually take ownership of those. We have to notify the property owners, and then they have rights if they want to stop it, those types of things. Time frames, yeah. So there's some hoops to jump through, but yeah, we've demolished some properties. At our last council meeting, in fact, on Monday night, we approved the demolition of 2 more properties. So we try to have the money to do that, and also encourage people to try to get their properties fixed up and back in compliance. And we have, you can give some people some time and some give them some flexibility, but by the same token, if they're not going to make the improvements
They
and get
just
things
ignore it.
fixed, we sometimes just have to take action.
On a positive basis, folks, the sisters there next to the IG store, those two buildings that are being renovated.
Yes.
Now, here's a perfect example of 2 pieces of property that were identical, and they were just going to rack and ruin. And by golly, I'm really impressed with the work on the one that's almost done, and then I was getting a good start on the other one on the corner.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for the community, to have those 2 pieces of property renovated like that and be productive.
Absolutely. I mean, very easily could have been, those could have been torn down. and
Easily.
Another asphalt parking lot.
Yeah.
But
Didn't the high school take?
they did.
Building
Yeah.
trades are rehabbing.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that?
They did, yeah. Last school year, the high school building trades
Did a
class
whale of a job.
actually rehabbed both of those.
And-
I mean, so, I would say both the top and the bottom floors. There's 2 units on the one,
Yeah. Right.
the house on the right, and it's almost complete. They almost got everything done, and there were still a few things that needed to be done. So David Landerman, who owns the property, is getting those things finished up, and now he also had the roof put on the sister to the left to get it kind of winterized.
Yeah.
Now, did the high school do that in lieu of building a new house like they
Yes,
have traditionally?
They did. And I thought it was very, very wise on the high school's part, because those young people got experience in renovating houses.
Rehabbing, sure.
And while you need to know how to build a new house, that's obviously important if you're going in the construction trade. A lot of the work that construction trades are doing now are renovating older houses.
Right.
So this gave them experience in that. So tearing out plaster and finding surprises behind the wall, as all of us
Always.
who have old houses know.
Oh, yeah.
They got experience in all that.
Real education service there, because we all know that there's a crying need for hands-on know-how on the various trades, and educating a youngster to give him an opportunity to go out into the world and use that acquired knowledge. It gives them a jump up, as opposed to not everybody can go to college.
Right.
That's just the way it is.
Right.
But we sure need technical and skill training, and so hats off to of course, the high school down through the years have done a good job. They've always built new houses and sold them, and that's been a nice thing.
My parents in Mayfair live in a building trades house, so built
Yeah.
years ago, and
Is that right?
it's well done. Yeah.
Well, they would be well done.
Yeah.
Because it has to be well done if you intend to get any kind of grade out of
If they
there.
were working under Dale McRoberts, I'll guarantee you they were well done. He had just one goal, and that was right.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
Which is the correct.
that's what they have to do.
Exactly.
There are other things going on in the city that we haven't even touched upon. Let's talk about taxes. Some people are upset about what they're paying for electricity and gas, and we did have that where we joined the consortium.
Mm-hmm.
And can you kind of break that down, a Reader's Digest version, very simplified for people like me?
Sure. I can explain about the utility tax that recently was passed.
Yes, please.
And also with regard to the electric aggregation. The city joined with, we'll talk about electric aggregation first. The city joined with other communities such as Atlanta, Mount Pulaski, Logan County about a year ago, and we went through this process of electric aggregation where we basically pooled our needs for electricity, went out onto the market, got bids, and then accepted what we thought was the lowest responsible bid to provide electricity to the folks that live within that aggregate area. We got a nice drop in electrical rates. It dropped just right around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And so at the time, we were probably had one of the lowest electrical rates of anywhere in the country anywhere in the state, because of the timing of the market and where we were able to get in and those types of things. This year, this past summer and into the fall, we started looking at needs that the city had with regard to some of those long-term issues, and I've already mentioned the sewer issue and the needs with regard to that. We also have needs with regard to our police and fire departments. Two needs actually for both of those departments. One is police and fire pensions. Every community has to have their own police and fire pension fund. So in other words, the policemen in Lincoln aren't part of a pension fund with the policemen in Springfield or Bloomington or Decatur. There's a Springfield police pension fund, Decatur, Lincoln. Everybody has their own individual fire and pension funds. Now, unfortunately, the city doesn't control any of the benefits for those. So the state legislature sets what the benefits are, but we have to provide all the funding for that.
They do that a lot.
They do. And the funding is provided through employee contributions and then through city contributions. The last four years, we have taken every dollar of increase we've gotten from property taxes and dedicated it to the police and fire pension funds. We don't get big increases in property taxes because we're tax capped. Logan County is a tax capped county, so we only get increases in our property taxes tied to the level of inflation. So we've been putting that money in there, and we've still been falling behind. So both of those pension systems were funded right around 50%, which means that we only had in reserve about 50% of what we would need to pay all the benefits long term. So we needed to do something for the pension funds. We also needed to deal with the space issues for the police and fire departments. The police department is 25-member force basically, and they work out of 1,600 square feet of rented space at the safety complex. We have to pay the county rent for that space. The fire department is operating out of what we think is the oldest operating firehouse in the state of Illinois. It was designed for Barney and Bill. Now, I don't mean Bill Gossett, but the horses, Barney and Bill.
I remember cleaning up after Barney and Bill.
So it was designed for that, and they don't have the space that modern fire departments need. So those are three: sewers, police and fire pension, police and fire space, and also our downtown improvements that we'd like to make. We've done some planning for downtown. We'd like to make some streetscape improvements. So those were 4 critical needs that we saw ahead for the city. We didn't have the funds to take care of those, and one option that we had was to consider increasing the utility tax. And what was passed by the city was a 4% utility tax. So basically it's adding a bit to your electrical, the cost for your electrical service, but then also the cost for natural gas. Roughly it's going to work out to about 4% of your bill. And that money will come in and it's going to be dedicated to those 4 items. So on the electricity side, even with this utility tax added, the rate that people are paying with that added in there is still going to be a little bit less than what they were paying before electric aggregation. So there's still be a little bit of savings there. Now on the natural gas side, that's actually an additional amount. But that's what we were looking at, those 4 kind of long-term issues, and trying to have a funding source to deal with those. So that was the proposal that came before the council, and that was what passed recently.
That's a pretty full nutshell. Really. I think you got through, in a short time, some very complex financing that you have to plan for looking ahead.
And that's really what it was looking ahead. I mean, nobody wanted to raise taxes. That's kind of a last resort. But in looking at the needs that the city had long term, hopefully, 20 years from now, people will look back and say, I'm glad that we did that. Yeah, because some of these things have been dealt with, or at least they're on their way to being dealt with.
I have 2 more questions, please.
Okay.
You can pick one.
Okay.
Okay. One is, you're facing the same problem that they're facing at the state level, and that's pensions. And I don't know, that just must be the devil. And the other question is to fix the downtown. But we have to have people to occupy these buildings that are viable. If we're going to fix it, put the money into fixing it. And I don't know where you're going to get the people. So that's my 2 questions. Pick one.
Okay, let's talk about downtown.
Yeah, okay.
It's a little bit of chicken and an egg, I think, in which comes first.
Right, okay.
We do have a very vibrant downtown compared with a lot of downtowns for communities our size. I mean, we have some anchor stores that have been there a long time, and everybody
thank goodness
knows
for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody knows who those are.
Yeah.
And we do have some vacant space, but not like a lot of communities. But our hope is that if we can improve the public space downtown, the sidewalks, perhaps the green space, those types of things, then it becomes more attractive for people to make investments in Lincoln, for businesses to locate downtown, and to make those investments that in turn are going to provide options for our local folks, maybe retail or dining options, but then also employment options for our people. So if you look at our sidewalks downtown, they need to be fixed. There are cracks and there are issues. Also, we've got some streets that are different widths and all, and I think we can, if we can find the dollars to do it, and hopefully there'll be some available through that utility tax and some grants that we've got to spend a remaining portion of a little bit of a grant that we have that we're going to be able to do a block or 2. Hopefully we'll make some of those improvements that will kind of start the ball rolling, kind of start the flywheel, start pushing that flywheel so it starts spinning on its own. So hopefully some of those improvements will in turn attract others who want to make improvements, and downtown then keeps going forward and rises.
It would be so wonderful. I can remember back, and so can you, when the downtown was really a big, busy deal.
Oh, yeah.
It
Well,
was
we had
very
nothing
nice.
west at the time.
Yeah. Particularly at Christmas time. I remember it was just magical at Christmas time.
Oh, amen.
Thornton's
Yeah.
Toy Store, the other stuff downtown, Landauer's, and
Yes, Myers,
yeah.
Perk Up, Spruce Up, on
Yeah.
and on and on it went.
right.
Well, most of us have at least somewhat vaguely familiar with the plans that are on the drawing board for downtown. Frankly, they're very, very attractive, and it certainly looked like something that's down the road. I'm not going to see the finish of that, I'm sure, but it would be really, it's quite nice. On paper, really looks good.
Yeah, it's designed to make things more easily traversed for pedestrians, for bikes, for cars, and to make the downtown attractive. Well,
And speaking of downtown, before the clock just about pushed me out of here, pushed us out of here, the street lights that are blinking, they seem to be just as successful as if they were working in a normal way. That's a personal observation. What, do you agree with that, Mr. Mayor?
I still get comments almost weekly about the stoplights, and just to
Yeah,
kind of
really?
refresh that issue, that stoplights are so old, we cannot buy replacement parts for them. So we would have to get new controllers, which would be quite costly. If we didn't go with the new controllers, we'd have to go with new standards, so new poles. And when you get new poles, you have to follow the IDOT standards, so you're talking about about $250,000. So I think people like the flow through there, so you come up, stop, and move on through. The issue that I've heard, and I understand it, is sometimes you go down Broadway and you go through those lights, and then you go down to Broadway and Logan, and you stop at the stoplight, and it's working, and you just drive on through. So people need to be cautious.
Well, it's kind of like Everett Dirksen said, you know, a million here, a million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money, aren't you, Keith?
That's right. That's right.
I remember doing that in mellifluous voice that he used. He was, anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for being with us. One of Lincoln's own has been our mayor here for 4 years, and in my judgment, this is not station opinion, it's mine. Done a great job, and we appreciate your being with us, sir.
Thanks.
We have to remember these caveats that any opinions we express are ours and ours alone, and that would refer to my closing statement about politicians accepting our mayor because he's on a different level. This is not my statement. The old fellow by the name of Plato said this. You remember him?
I think he died.
Sam Plato. Yes, he died. Big service. Big service. Old Plato says, if anyone at all is to have the privilege of lying, the rulers of the state should certainly have that presence. Well, not my opinion. Thank you for Viewpoint.
No!